We are set to continue to broaden our horizon with increasing access to education and skills, innovations in finance courses and credentials. This panel, led by Director of Investment Banking of Anand Rathi Atul Thakkar, will delve into the innovative financial models, course designs, and credentialing mechanisms that are making education more accessible and relevant in today's fast-paced world. With that, I welcome up our next group of panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, the co-panel members, to come here. The way we will do is, I'll give a quick 1 minute on what we intend to discuss, and then we'll do a round robin. Essentially, if you see, the panel over here is addressing to the tier 2, tier 3 towns, or Bharat as we call it. And this is the panel, and people like them are the guys who will essentially increase your so-called GER in the higher education and ensure that people in the vernacular or regional language also have a good living, a good employment. So probably starting first with Anil, in your journey, you moved a different path by starting test prep for students who could not understand and access English as a language, and also opening doors for them by ensuring they start learning in their own language. And how have you seen this change with the students and moving forward in their journey? Could you throw some light on it?
Thanks, Atul. So I have gone through this whole journey in my personal life also, and in my startup also. I come from a village, and hence I have seen those problems which generally people face in smaller places, and I can correlate very well with that. In my journey, when I started my entrepreneurial journey, I started with physical offline learning. So we started with this thought that let's help people in smaller places to get jobs, and to begin with, help them in preparation for various government jobs. So that was 2010, and internet was not too much there. So we used to have physical centers all across. At the peak of it, we were having approx 100 physical branches in all major cities in India, and teaching almost 100,000 students in those physical locations. But one of the big thing which we realized at the time, that if we really want to take education to the last mile, let's say to a village, or let's say to a town, or tier 3, tier 4 city, doing it offline or in a physical setup is definitely going to be a challenge. And especially unit economics or financial perspective, it's definitely a challenge. And that's when we kind of came up with this thought that can we reach out to those people through online mode? And that's when we started Adda in 2016. As on today, so as compared to, let's say, 100,000 students, now we teach about 2 million students online. And especially our focus is how we are able to do this learning, how we are able to impart this learning in their local language. So vernacular is one of the focus area. And if you look at the scale, if you look at the efficiency of the model, so earlier we used to have around 1,000 students to teach to almost 100,000 students. Now it's about 200 to 300 students who are able to teach 2 million people. And maybe tomorrow it may be 2 million people also, and maybe the same number of teachers can teach those. So in my opinion, if we want to really empower those people who are in villages or smaller towns, online is the way. That's how you can reach them. And vernacular and providing your courses or learning at a very highly affordable price. Again, these are the two pillars of building a business around it.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil. You used online and affordable. Now, let me just touch upon affordable first. Coming to Ashish, you came up with some unique model and addressing to a similar class of audience and ensuring they get employable, especially when in higher education, kids of that strata, when they come to you, almost 50% of a generation's saving is put up as a bet on the child, and there is tremendous pressure. And then how do you ensure that they get employed?
You're absolutely right, and this is something that we have seen across. If parents have any money, then they will sort of spend that in the children's education, because that's their thought process, that this is a ticket for my child to come out of poverty, come out of the life that I have lived. So essentially what we do is that there are three sort of pillars to this. One is the science of learning, second is discipline and engagement, and third is the outcomes, placement, selection rate. Talking about these three things, science of learning is something which is probably the most difficult problem here to crack, because in the offline environment, in let's say 40, 50 universities, 20 cities across the country, to figure out and open that black box of education is probably one of the hardest problem, because what happens inside a classroom, how a student is learning, how he's progressing, that is probably the difficult thing, because there are no feedback loops in education apart from the feedback that comes at the end of education tenure, whether he has got a job or not. But that's an outcome, that's not a feedback that is coming to you. So this is the system that we have designed, and obviously we are no sort of expert at this, and we have taken now almost our 5, 6, 7 years, and we'll continue to evolve. One is the feedback side of things, that every class we right now get around 60 data points from the student in every course that he is pursuing. Plus there are multiple feedback loops. We get feedbacks from students on their daily mood meter, we get feedback on faculty, we get end semester feedbacks. So there are multiple feedback loops, and those feedback loops work across the whole value chain. We get feedback on faculty quality, we get feedback on content, we get feedback on pedagogy, we get feedbacks on, let's say, how students are progressing. So basis that you have to continuously iterate your product you're offering to the student. That is number one, and that's a continuous loop. You just can't sit for one moment that, okay, now I've figured out the education product, because education needs are continuously changing. The second part, which is again a very critical part, but more of the consumer psyche part, is that how do you, once you have created a good product and you're continuously evolving it, how do you drive more and more engagement from the student? So in the formal education, it's both actually discipline and engagement that you have to continuously work for, because if the student is not coming in the classroom, then whatever product you may have created, like nothing will work. So that's the number two part, and obviously there are multiple things that you have to do, drive engagement, whether it's through tech, whether it's through Gen AI, whether it's through your discipline things. And the third part, which is equally difficult, is how to drive outcomes. And measuring outcomes is again a very difficult thing, because it's not the number of students who is getting employed, because that's the ultimate coverage part of it. It's actually the efficacy of learning science or learning product that you have created that get measured on a single student level. Like how many students, let's say if a student is applying to 100 jobs, or what is the selection rate? So that again goes to how well you have taught him subject matter skills, his interview prep, soft skills, aptitude, coding skills. So all of that comes in, and all of them then gives a feedback loop to the different part of your learning product. And which eventually lead to, all of this eventually lead to, like, what is the coverage of placements? Like we know that a 90% placement product is a very good product in the formal education segment. And what is the ROI that you are giving to the student? So all of this combined, we feel that forms that ultimately over a period of maybe 5 year, 10 year, will form that virtuous loop for the student.
Thank you. Puneet, moving to you, you are working also with a strata which probably is not touched by many.
Correct.
And in fact is one of the most difficult, the blue collar workforce.
Yep.
And how do you ensure that the corporates pay for it, there is efficacy, and more importantly, you are one of the few tech companies which are profitable.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. I think with every business, right, that at the end of the day, bottom line matters, right? So as a company which is providing an upskilling ecosystem to the employer, it's extremely important for us to make sure that their business metrics are being impacted, right? Most of the segments that we work with, they really focus on soft skills. And while hard skills mostly you learn as a on-the-job training or apprenticeship program, but soft skills are something that you can learn online as well, right? And what you mentioned about profitability, I think it's mostly about figuring out technology ecosystem that already exists and tapping into that. So the segment that we work with, WhatsApp is the best platform that they use every day, right? Even a very basic smartphone would typically have a WhatsApp that works right? So once you kind of incorporate everything combined, you get to a space where you're upskilling without the need of a learning curve, adopting a new technology for the learner / the worker. And that helps them be, I would say, confident and like sir mentioned, vernacular language. So I would say these 2-3 things combined kind of help them be very confident on that whatever they're learning, they'll grab it and they'll grasp it and retain it as a knowledge. And in the end, companies see that impact in their bottom line. And that's where kind of money comes to us, because a real impact is where money is.
No, Puneet, you mentioned about technology and, especially WhatsApp, and I'll come back to that on the risk involved, around the same,
Right.
about using the third-party technology, etc. But before that, I want to, Rishab, come to you. You are the finance guy on this platform. You are probably fueling and empowering the Bharat of, tomorrow. There has been tons of data and noise around, NPAs, FLDGs, and regulations. How do you ensure you navigate through this and yet innovate?
Yeah, sure. So the role that we play is we help education institutions across the country digitize their payments and solve for 2 major challenges that institutions face. One is, recognition or realizing their revenue, which is just timely collection of their revenue from students. And, many of these institutions are very large, in terms of student count, also in terms of the value of revenue that they often exceeding $500 million or more. Right? So one is realization of revenue and whatever tools we can use from the fintech side to, which is such as, for instance, affordability and EMIs to enable them to recognize and realize those revenues very quickly. That's one. And the second issue that a lot of these large institutions or institutions across the strata in the education ecosystem face is reconciliation, right? To receive payments, they will open up multiple sources of, multiple modes of payment, and keeping track of them and, reconciling them with to even know that who's paid and who's not. We've observed that challenge exists in even institutions that are more than $500 million a year, right, at that scale. So these are the 2 challenges that we are working on. And what we are doing is we are using a combination of financial services and technology to solve for these. So like you mentioned, especially on the financial services part, the core of our business is really on the lending side, which is on the providing easy, convenient, affordable monthly payments to help parents pay their fees over a staggered, in a staggered period of time throughout the academic year. And there's a lot of RBI regulations that have come in recently specific to FLDG and digital lending guidelines. We think it's amazing for the ecosystem because operating in a ambiguous regulatory environment where you're not clear if whatever you're doing, is that okay with the regulator, is that not okay with the regulator? That was the case till 2021, right? Where nobody knew what is right and what is wrong, and it was up to the company or the individual to really distinguish what needs to be done or what is permitted, what's not permitted. In 2022, RBI came out with digital lending guidelines, which were very elaborate, very detailed about what is permitted and what is not. There were a couple of gray areas in those digital lending guidelines. RBI came out with another FAQ and subsequently another memorandum for FLDG, permitting what is allowed, what is not. So we just feel that it's very, very good for the ecosystem where the Reserve Bank or the regulator is very clear and transparent about these are the guardrails, this is how you have to operate, this is what's permitted and this is not what permitted. And these regulations were very detailed. They literally went into the nuances of what goes in the agreement, what is the format of loan agreement that you have to execute with the borrower. So very detailed, regulations, and I think that's very good for the ecosystem because, it's much better than an ambiguous sort of environment where now there is there's crystal clear clarity of what's permitted, what's not. So from that perspective, we think it's very good for the ecosystem.
So, Rishab, just to add to this, it is always perceived that education lending is commercially the most unviable product. And if you could just touch upon that, and you mentioned a lot about regulations, and then I'll come to Anil, you on the recent regulations, and do you really think all regulations are good? Because Rishab has been advocating about the regulations.
So yeah, you're right. When we were starting out, one of the data points that was always widely available in many newspaper headlines, and it continues till today, what RBI classifies as education loans has probably the highest default as a category of loans across all retail loans, whether you took personal loans or two-wheeler loans, consumer durable loans or car loans. Almost 7 to 8% at a category level, which is extremely high relative to any other category. And when we were starting out, that was a surprising, there was a very surprising number for us as well. And this is a number that we were like, why is this so high? But when you go one level deeper and when you try and understand what's happening in this ecosystem, we realize that the prevailing product category that existed for the last 15, 20 years was a student-focused loan where, the student would study for 4 years, have a moratorium, and then graduate, get a job and then begin repaying his loan, right? So that was one cornerstone of the education loan product that was prevailing in the market. The second thing was, the regulator or the government basically instructed banks on what rate of interest that they have to lend at and what is the security that they can and they cannot take for different types of loans. So for instance, the government released a guideline where they classified education loans in 3 buckets, 0 to 4 lakhs for the entire course, 4 to 7 and 7 and above. And they basically told banks that, listen, for 0 to 4 lakhs, you cannot take any security. For 4 to 7, you could take maybe a co-borrower, and 7 and above, you could take proper security. Now, interestingly, because of extreme directions from the government, what this became is a public sector bank play who were not really doing it from a commercial objective, who were primarily doing the education loan business as a social objective that they had to fulfill for the government. And talking about that 7% data, a very interesting data point there is almost the entire default of that 7% was coming from the 0 to 4 lakh category, where the government had told banks that you cannot take any security, right? So effectively what happened is, banks were not, able to do a marketplace, or I would say the market environment was not leading to decisions from the financial side, and hence most private sector banks stayed out of it. The public sector banks had to, were compelled to participate, and internally they just knew that this is a write-off that they have to live with because the government has told them not to take any security, etc. Right. And they can't say no to any customer. So inevitably what ended up happening was, while public sector banks participated, they just made it very hard for a customer to take a loan because they knew that these are the defaults that are coming. So it just became a bad scenario both for the bankers who are lending and for the consumers for whom the process just became very lengthy, right? So that's the context. But the way we are approaching this market is a little bit different. One of the cornerstones of our thesis is that, in India, it's a parent who's paying almost 90-95% for their kids' education rather than the student, right? And we are creating a product that's aimed at the actual payer who's a parent, right? And who may not necessarily look for a 15-20-year loan when he is already 55 years of age. So those are some, cornerstone philosophies, and we're not seeing anywhere close to the defaults are there in the, in the education loan category that RBI classifies as.
Right. Anil, your quick take on the current regulation, and because of that, have you seen any dip in or in the ecosystem on the registration of the students on the coaching side?
First of all, I think this is intent-wise, this is in the right direction. So government has come up with this regulation and some guidelines for private coaching institutes, coaching center, tuition centers. Intent-wise, I find it right. And basically, there are two things which they kind of want to ensure. One is how to take care of interest of a student in today's dynamic era where there are so many things which are influencing a decision of any student to buy a course, whether it may be social media, it may be a lot of things which are happening around. And joining a course is just a step in that direction to prepare or to aim for something big. But what happens later? Because otherwise, if you look at school, colleges, all those things, there's a lot of regulation and in some ways students' interests have been taken care of. But this was one area where there were no guidelines and it was completely between parents, students and coaching institutes. And of late, in last few years, we have seen a lot of cases around mis-selling, around providing the wrong course or misinformed selling and all those things. So this is I think the first intent, that how we take care of the interests of a student once somebody joins a coaching institute or tuition center, how as a government, as an enabler, provide some guidelines so that things are taken care of. And second area where government want to kind of emphasize, which is also again very, very important, is mental wellness of these kids. Generally, how I see it, this guideline is mostly in context of students who are still in school or just coming out of school and preparing for college entrance exams. At that age, it's still a lot of, that's the age where it's a lot of, you can influence them in a lot of wrong ways. And what we have seen in our own experience is that there are a lot of pressures on even on every student who prepares for these exams, from family, from peers, personal aspirations, a lot of things. But formally, because this whole coaching institute and tuition centers, this is all informal setup. There is no formal way or the right way to provide them that counseling or that guidance, that how they should cope up with this kind of pressure. What if they are not able to clear the exam? There are a lot of things they can do even if they don't clear certain exam. So and this was need of the hour in my view, because if you think of these kids who are coming from village, a lot of times they don't have that much exposure and at a very impressionable age they are. So it matters a lot that we create those things which take care of their mental wellness, and if they want to prepare somewhere and they join somewhere, how their interests are taken care of. Because one of the things in that guideline they say is that if somebody joins a coaching institute and let's say person finds that this is not fulfilling his expectations, there should be a mechanism to refund the fee or pro rata refund the fee. I think this is in the right direction.
Right. Thank you. Moving away from regulations to technology, most edtech companies have spent millions or billions on technology building, whether in-house or bought from others. Puneet, I would first like you to touch upon, and then probably Ashish, as to how you all have managed the technology, and especially Puneet using WhatsApp, and also ensured mitigating the risk around the same.
Right. See, I think our fundamental belief is that technology is there to enable, right? And when you look at solving a problem, the first question we asked ourselves is, okay, do we need to build a new technology, or there is a technology that already exists, right? And at least for our audience, the answer was fairly simple, that WhatsApp already exists. They use it every day, the first app they download on their phone. So why build or reinvent the wheel that already exists, right? And having said that, like the same day when we came up with the idea, the second question was, okay, what about security, right? And I think that's the most important aspect, that as, let's say, as founders or people who are at the very top, we have to start thinking about security from day zero, right? The moment you think of a solution, your first question has to be, okay, how do I take my user's consent? How do I encrypt the data correctly? Can this data be misused in any way? How do I make, like, as an example, while we are on WhatsApp, but you cannot access our training unless you're authenticated by your organization, right? Even if you have that training from your past, you would not be able to access it. And that was when we had these data points and we had these answers that, okay, we know how can we ensure that there is data security, there's encryption, there's consent, there's authentication, authorization, is when we finalize that, okay, yes, WhatsApp can solve as a solution for us. And that's, I think, across the board for all the edtech companies, that how do you start thinking about encryption? How do you start thinking about authentication the very first day and then implement it within your organizations and systems?
Thank you, Puneet. Ashish?
Yeah.
Quick.
So, absolutely. So for us, we look at tech in two ways. One is that technology helps us in giving this solution to masses and work at scale. So let's say if I am only running one sort of B school at a scale of around 500, I'll most probably don't need any tech. But if I have to implement this solution, let's say at the current scale of 10,000 and go to 50,000, where all do I need the tech? That's more for Sunstone to solve for scale. The other thing that we look at is that how technology can make a learning product better for a student. So everything that I talked about, learning as a science, feedback loop, all of this would not have been just possible to do it in an offline manner. All the intervention, all the preemption that you do with the student, that we know from the last 5 years data, that if a student in first semester is progressing this way, then probably he will not land up in a, let's say, a 50,000 rupee job. These are the preemption, these are the interventions that are needed to be done. So all of this is enabled by tech. And the third and the most critical element from our side is the network effect that we leverage out of the corporate partners. Because if a one job comes to Sunstone, all the Sunstone students are eligible to apply for that job. Now that would not have been possible without running this kind of technology at scale. So all the completely placement process is completely automated and it runs on a Sunstone app. There is no offline part. So that's a real sort of game changer from student perspective that helps us achieve a 90-95% placement for a Guwahati student as well. It's much easier for get a job to a Bangalore student, but it's very difficult for Guwahati student. So that's where technology also plays a very critical role for us.
Fantastic. We have good about 2 minutes for each of y'all. We've spoken about past, present. What is the future? Is AI more a buzzword, or can we ensure that AI is embedded appropriately for each one of y'all in your businesses to enhance the growth of learning outcome for your students? Quick 2 minutes. And apart from AI, what else do you see as the future for your segment? If Ashish, starting from you.
Absolutely. Definitely, we believe that AI is going to change a lot of things, whether it's the learning outcome side of things, whether it's sort of creating a employability path for student, interventions, as simple thing as resume writing. Like it's very easy to write a very sexy resume now in 2 minutes that probably would have taken at least 30-40 hours of effort for a student. So a lot of things are changing with AI, and obviously it's an uncharted territory. All of us are sort of discovering AI as we go on. And specifically I think from the future of higher ed in India, I believe that now genuinely the time for higher ed has come. We believe that next 24 to 2 years to 5 years is going to be game changing for Indian higher ed. There are a lot of positive policy which are being there. So I believe that generally the sector is opening up. So very, very excited to see how next 2 to 5 years are going to look like.
Thank you, Ashish. Anil, do you want to take it?
So AI is definitely important because education is all about content, and there are various use cases. But in our case, other than AI, we are also seeing a lot of traction or engagement around 3D or AR, VR. Because in our case, let's say any student is, let's say 11th class, 12th class, or preparing for JEE or NEET, they want to understand a concept. So what we have done internally is on our app, let's say somebody is teaching something on a PPT, and at any point of time you want to refer to to a 3D model of the same, and you can play around, and you can also ask students to play around that. I think that has also proved a very good tool to interact and understand the basic concept, whether it is about human body, it is about any concept in physics, or even doing experiments around chemistry. So we are seeing good engagement there also.
Thank you, Anil. Puneet?
So of course, like AI is going to change a lot of things. At least at an employment level, it's changing a job roles itself, right? A lot of jobs will be born and a lot of jobs will die. So AI kind of is going to revolutionize everything there, right? But it also enables companies like ourselves to make sure that we provide the right, again, technology to our learners, whether it's through vernacular content, whether it's through AR and VR, like he mentioned, right? So as an example, 5 years down the line, headsets that Apple Vision Pro has just come out would probably affordable to everybody, right? So to learn a hard skill, we might not need a physical center. A VR headset probably would be enough. It's a transformational shift that's happening, and we're kind of living through it. So of course, technology, whether it's AI, whether it's AR, VR, is going to change the entire landscape across the board from education to upskill to job. But it also would increase a lot of access at a much affordable manner to a lot of people. Right? Today, we can create a vernacular content where people don't really need to consider English as their primary language anymore. And that, again, is becoming cost effective primarily because of AI tools that have come out in the market. So that's how we look at it, that, of course, technology would evolve, change a lot of job roles in itself as well. But it would also help us in upskilling faster and better as well, and making it affordable for somebody living in a tier 4 city in India. That is what technology would enable.
Thank you, Puneet. Rishab, your words?
So, I don't think anybody has any doubt about the potential of AI to radically transform or change the way everything is done. To be honest, we are still figuring out what are the implications of AI specifically in how we work with institutions and how we solve the payments and, affordability aspect for fee collection at education institutions. There is an application of machine learning that we already do in our credit risk underwriting. But beyond that, on AI, we are yet trying to figure out what is a larger scale application, and we are yet figuring out. So
I think that's quite candid. You have your investors over here.
I don't think so.
Right. No, I think, probably if I look 2008, 9, 10, big data and cloud were the buzzwords in the technology industry. And today, they are enablers, and it's one set of services which is provided and has helped corporates augment. But it does not take over the entire organization. And that's what probably everybody have to be mindful of, that the learning will remain in education and it will be driven by content, by people. AI will be a tool to support it, and there will be a lot of pitfalls before it actually gets utilized across the board. So, your last comments, Ashish, overall?
Overall, and now we have been in this industry from last 6 years, and I still joke around that it probably would have taken that decision 6 years back, whether want to do education or not, and the kind of sort of hard problems that we charted and solving, it were probably a very sort of a bold move. As all the wisdom currently that I have, I still see that, okay, that his decision was a very bold decision. But now, after doing this for 6 years, I genuinely feel hopeful with every single day that the problem of education, the problem of skills, problem of outcomes is not a very hard problem to solve. I believe that there is, if you have the right intent, if you have the right skills, it's a long game that's definitely there. It will take at least 10, 15, 20 years for you to solve this problem. But this is a problem worth sort of living for. This is one of the hardest problem, at least in our country. And that's which will determine the future of our country. So personally, it's a very fulfilling journey for me that I've taken in last 6 years, and that I sort of see taking for another 10, 15, 20 years.
Thank you. Puneet, probably you can just touch upon, how corporates are ready to invest in probably 30 seconds as to why corporates are, interested in investing in the learning for blue collars.
Right. So see, the thing is, like you mentioned, right? Technology is evolving and the entire landscape is changing on its head, right? So for every corporate, it becomes extremely crucial that they invest in the processes today so they can future-proof their own processes or their business growth for tomorrow. And specifically with the introduction of the tools that are being created because of AI and stuff like that, it is becoming more and more important that the people that work within the company are pretty much upskilled. It's not a phase of our, let's say, generational transformation where we can just be, okay, unskilled labor would suffice, right? So we're moving towards a time where you need to have skills to be able to grow and survive in the industry. And that's where they are investing in upskilling their entire workforce.
Thank you. Anil, your last closing comments?
So personally, I have seen huge change in test prep in my journey last 20 years. So 20 years back, I was the first one in my village to think of IIT and aspire for IIT-like exam. Recently, I went to my place and I saw there are a lot of people who came to me and they said that we want to prepare and we want to go for that exam. That is a huge change. Now education is more affordable, people are more aware, they can aspire for big things, and technology is the enabler. Technology has brought in the change.
Thank you. Rishab?
So, I've always observed that the total size of the category of education in India is larger than many other categories that we would think of. It's, for instance, larger than e-commerce in India, right? And at least from our perspective, we've always seen and observed that education has been a slight laggard in terms of their adoption of digital payments and digital solutions on credit and any other payment instruments. So we feel there is still a lot of white space for us to just help the category adopt a lot of digitize their entire payment infrastructure, as well as solve for both the education institution and the student and parent community using various payment instruments, credit being one of the core parts of it.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone.